The three main components that you need to know are the shutter speed, the aperture, and the ISO. The shutter speed is the time taken for the camera to take one singular image, and it also determines how solid the picture is when you take it. Now, if you don't know how a camera works, I would strongly recommend that you pause this video and you watch this one by the slow-mo guides, as it really clearly explains how a camera works when it's taking a picture, particularly the shutter speed. If we shot a photo at 1/1000th of a second, it makes it very, very fast for the camera to take the image, which means everything in the frame will be shot instantaneously. There'll be no blur, everything will be crisp, sharp, and in motion. So if someone was jumping in the air, it looks like they were levitating. This is very, very good for action-paced sports such as skateboarding, football, basketball, you name it. But bear in mind that when you shoot at a fast shutter speed, the image will be very dark because there's less time for the light to reach the camera sensor. If we shot at 1/25 seconds, it will be fast enough to make a clear image, but it will be slow enough to make a blur. That means that this shutter speed is very, very, very good for panning effects, where you follow the subject as it's moving, and as it moves directly in front of you, you take the picture so that you get a nice blurred background and a nice sharp subject in the frame, such as cyclists, driving cars, trains, and so much more. But just bear in mind that because it's a slower shutter, it will be a brighter image. So you may have to make extra modifications to the camera to make it darker, which I will explain later on. And finally, if we shot at 15 seconds, that means it would take 15 seconds for the camera to take one singular image and 15 seconds for the light to be recorded by the camera sensor. So that means the image will be very, 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 very bright, and it will be best to use a shutter this slow in dark conditions. Because you'll be shooting at such a long exposure, you will need the camera to stay very, very still, and this is where tripods come in. Aperture is a hole in the camera that determines the depth of field in the image. Now what this means is how deep in the field is in focus when you adjust the focus ring on your camera. So for example, if we shot a picture at f1.4, it's a very shallow depth of field, and only this much deep into the field will be in focus. So that makes a very, very blurry background, and it makes whatever's in focus very, very sharp, and it pretty much stands out from whatever is behind it. If we shot at an aperture of f5.6, you'd have a deeper depth of field. There'll be more room in the depth of field for it to be in focus. Whatever's in the subject will be a lot more sharper and it will stand out. And the background will still be blurry, but it would also still have a bit more detail to it, so you can kind of just make out what's going on in the background. Finally, if we shot at an aperture of f16, you'd have a very, very, very deep depth of field, and pretty much everything will be in focus. So that would mean it would be really, really good for shooting things like cityscapes and landscapes and everything else in between. Now, as I mentioned before, aperture is a hole in the camera, and the way how you change the depth of field is that you change the size of the hole in the camera. So that means if you shoot at f1.4, that means it's a big aperture because it's a big hole. It would also mean that the image will be brighter because there's more space for the light to enter the camera and reach the sensor. Alternatively, if we shoot at a big F number, that means it's a very small hole, which means that there's less space for light to pass through to reach the camera sensor. So at this point, you should have a good understanding of how the shutter speed and aperture work. And what you can do is that you can adjust your camera so that the ISO is an auto, but you can manually control the shutter speed and the aperture. And you can go out, have a test and experiment, and you can see the different effects for yourself. And then once you're feeling confident, then we can start messing around with the ISO. And finally, you will have full and complete control of your camera. Now finally, you've got ISO, which makes the difference digitally by brightening or darkening the image. What this means is that if you want to shoot at a fast shutter speed in a dark environment, and you can't do that because you have your biggest aperture and you got the minimum fastest shutter speed to get your desired shot, but you can't get it because it's too dark, that's where the ISO comes in, and that digitally brightens the picture for you. The catch with the ISO is that the brighter the ISO value, the brighter the image will be, but the more grainier the image will be as well. So if you were to take a picture of something in ISO 51200, you will get the grainiest image known to man. But if you shoot at an ISO of 100, you will get the most grain-free photo you have ever seen. If you want a grain-free image, I'd advise to keep your ISO as low as possible and only boost it up whenever necessary. In some cameras, they'd be so basic and entry level that it going up to about ISO 3200, 6400, that's a very, very dangerous place to go because it will be so grainy and distorted, it will just look like a very, very ugly image. So that's pretty much everything you need to know about how to operate the camera in manual mode. Things like white balance and everything else, you don't really need to worry about too much. You can do that out of your own will and experimentation, but I just leave mine on auto because it just makes my life a bit easier. But other than that, practice, 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 and hopefully you will find yourself shooting in manual within the next few days or so. Because it feels so good to be in complete control of your camera and you can get any shot you want because you know how to make it. There you go, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more tutorials and vlogs and maybe a couple of short films as well if I ever get the time and patience to make some. Hope you guys all enjoyed it and I look forward to seeing you guys all soon. Take it easy and have a great day.